Come on! Let's really get this going.
Well, this is we don't obviously start our pod to the usual way and introduce immediately, but we probably should. So welcome everyone to the Spill the TCG podcast for the first time. I've actually said that without stuttering, so that's brilliant. It's a bit of a tongue
Progress.
twister.
That's
Progress. So I'm Alex Dow. I'm joined by my fellow co-caster in Joe Bernard and an unfamiliar face on my right, Mr. Joel Deluxe, Mr. Jack Old himself. Rab is unfortunately still away, tending to something else, which is we're very happy for him. Of course, he's been able to finally have his baby.
Yeah.
But, yeah, congratulations to them too. So yeah, welcome Jack. How you feeling?
Thank you very much. Yeah, excited. It's been well. I actually don't think we've ever really sat around and had like me and Joe obviously chat quite a lot about from an OmniPoke perspective, but it's quite cool to do something with I guess you as well. Now we talk quite a lot outside of Pokemon based stuff, but we actually don't talk about Pokemon all that much. So yeah, cool to be here. Obviously, don't want to step on Rab's toes too much, but yeah, he's tending to things that are far more important than Pokemon in some people's eyes. So yeah, right.
Not to me, apparently.
Only some.
Definitely.
Well, I'm not
to
even
me,
convinced
'cause
they're
I'm
more
already
important to
on holiday.
Rab, to be honest. But we'll see.
His first message to us is that he's not had a relaxing time so far. He's not been able to just play his video games for
Can't
a
believe
little
it.
bit of time.
Can't believe it's not gone how he thought, which was
Wasn't
just
what he signed up
playing.
for.
Just a 2 month holiday or whatever he was.
Yeah. God's
Joe,
sake.
how are we feeling post Gdansk?
Yeah, good. It was a bit of an in and out job, even though I did get there early. The flight times were just abysmal. I don't know how I keep falling for the same trap where I get up at like 3 to get to the airport for like a 6 or 7 a.m. flight, and then as soon as I land, I'm like, well, I'm obviously dead. I need to sleep. So the first day is just ruined. I've slept from like 1 p.m., which is when I got in, till 6. Then got up just to like eat and so I could sleep the whole night through. I stayed up for like 4 hours or whatever, but didn't do anything. Was just in my hotel, and then it was just the tournament itself. But at least the tournament was good. It was a genuinely very good tournament. I do like Gdansk. It's convenient, and yeah, the venue's pretty good actually. And we actually had more space than last time, and that was noticeable. I think that was actually really helpful that we had more space this time around. So yeah, can't really say a bad word about the tournament itself. That was pretty good, and obviously we were casting, which is much less stressful, I think, on the whole compared to playing.
Jack, did you go Gdansk last year? Because obviously you weren't able.
Yeah,
to
I
join
went
us
last year. To be honest, it was probably like I think Stuttgart is my favorite regional of the year usually, but we've done Stuttgart quite a few times. I think Gdansk was my favorite like new venue, probably post COVID. To be honest, I really enjoyed. I'd never been to Poland before last year, so I was a bit sad to miss it this year. It was considerably more. Like I remember last year, it was super cheap to do, but I think it was considerably more expensive this year. I don't know whether there was like some kind of events going on or whatever, but yeah, I was kind of sad to miss it, but yeah, really enjoyed it last year. So hoping to get back there again. And I feel like a lot of people post COVID have also said Warsaw the year before was also just an incredibly good regional as well. So it sounds like they're 3 for 3 on good regionals in Poland so far, which is always exciting because yeah, more places to go, different places to go, and stuff like that. And yeah, the only thing I remember from last year that I guess wasn't necessarily a negative, but like it was just so like it was snowing and it was just so blistery cold. I don't know whether it was snowing this year or whether it
It
was
was
just
much
cold.
milder. There was
That's
bad
not a
wind,
negative.
which hurt.
Yeah, it was fine, but
The wind hurt some people traveling. Right, some Americans were waylaid, but overall, I think it was very mild for the whole time we were there.
Yeah, there was some shaky moments for the planes to land, but yeah, it wasn't no Christmas markets this time because it actually kicked off on that weekend of Gdansk last year. This time it was earlier in the November period. But yeah, before we start going into the tournament, it looked like Joe, you were head down into your phone.
Sorry, yeah, I was certainly playing Pocket.
Yeah, exactly. That was a nice segue into it because I think Pocket probably released on the journey out, or maybe it was the day
Yes.
before out of into Gdansk. So yeah, let's talk Pocket. I mean, because that's obviously been a lot of people's time for the past week or so now. both of you been well versed in the Pocket meta and the Pocket of collecting cards and the whole Pocket universe? Enjoying it so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Obviously, there was a few ways of being able to get it early. So I'd already seen a few streams and stuff, and it looked quite cool. And I downloaded it, and it was weird. I feel like I really enjoyed it for the first few hours, but then quickly found that once I'd run out of packs to open, or it quickly dwindled out. But the biggest thing for me is actually they've already put 3 events on in the first week of it being out. So there's been so many things that have drawn me back to the game, and I think that's probably, if they continue to do that and if they can keep up with like that pace, I think that's probably one of the best things they could do to keep people interested. Because I think the gameplay loop at the moment, while there's not a huge amount of sets, is fairly linear, which is fine. Like it's early in its cycle. I think that's understandable. But I think that was probably the biggest criticism for me, is that like the gameplay didn't feel great. But because there's been a few events now and reasons to go back, I have found myself going back. So I guess I'm a sucker for marketing, is all that's really saying. But it's working, and like I still check the app every day. And I remember saying to Joe while he was out in Gdańsk, I was like, yeah, I feel like I've already burnt all my energy on this. But then they put an event on Monday and then another one today, and actually I've been playing every day. So yeah, something's working, I guess. I still think there's, like I say, some issues here and there with it being a pretty limited card pool and stuff like that, but it's a lot of fun. It's very casual. It feels very different to like live or even just like the actual TCG in general. But I think it's a good change just from a casual perspective. It doesn't feel like you have to actually focus on it like properly and stuff like that, which is, I guess, what they want. I think it's what they're aiming for, at least.
Yeah, I think it definitely catches that same Go crowd that came in. It's like, yes, we love Pokemon. Why not give this a go? And it's so catered to casual friendly that you don't have to know the TCG in any which way to enjoy the content. I was the exact same as Jack. I was bored after day one. Like, I played for maybe like 5 hours, I think, got through all the things. And then I was like, I have no reason to play anymore for like 12 hours. And it's like, okay, they really have hit the brakes hard, which is a bit grim. And it feels like it needs those events to be continuous, honestly, like multiple of them, for me to actually want to go back into the app. I was very fortunate in that I pulled 2 Pikachu EX, so I quite early on had... I'm free to play it, but I had a very early on like decent Pikachu deck, and I pulled basically like no EXs since then. So I'm still rocking like the exact same Pikachu deck that I've had from like level 6 until now. I think I'm like level 16 or something. But fortunately, because it's Pikachu, it's good enough. So maybe it's because I like, again, Jack, you're saying it's very linear. I know it's very linear in all the gameplay cycles, but Pikachu's like the most basic strategy of all of them. I don't even have like evolving at all. Like I only have like one electrode that I could evolve into. Yippee, you know. So
I've heard people calling it the raging bolt of the.
Oh yes, it certainly is. It certainly is. But just like comparing this to something like Marvel Snap, which was just phenomenal in terms of a launch of a game, I feel like the RNG of this game feels so much less cool and fun and interesting than something like Snap. And also the depth of just physically the snap mechanic adds so much to a game, and this just feels so basic and boring. And I feel like losing to a coin flip feels worse than like other RNG elements that you could do. So and Snap conceals so much of its RNG in really interesting, fun ways that it feels like every game is different. Whereas this is the absolute opposite, where every game feels the same, but then you're feeling the impact of X or Y coin flip throughout that game.
Could you imagine if they brought in snap locations or of some sort where you got there's like a buff for a battleground in the actual?
There's nothing stopping that being the case, right? Even just for a cycle, like if it's an event for a week where it's like, oh, this is being held in this gym or whatever, and then fire types do 20 more damage, you know, like that could completely change an event, right? So I think that these are the possibilities they have to explore to make it more interesting, rather than just say, oh, there's these 5 promos you can chase for the next 2 days, which is like fine, and sure, I did it, but it's not actually that interesting. So they definitely need card pool changes, but just core mechanically, I also think it feels like they missed the mark compared when there's the model of Snap, the possibility, they went so safe with the possibilities. The only good outcome I can think of that is that like it's very easy for kids or someone who know nothing about the TCG to get involved. but I also think kids need more stimulation than the game offers, especially when they see a 12-hour waiting list. It's like,
I guess
Jesus Christ.
my view on that is whether I haven't yet downloaded the app on like Mason's tablet, but I imagine that's because he was able to open packets in Hawaii because they had like the kind of demos out there. But I imagine that's going to be his first entry into like anything Pokemon TCG, right? Outside of cards that I've randomly pulled or open packs with him just for a laugh.
From that perspective, it is a masterstroke in that it is the entry point before the entry point.
That's and that it feels like that's going to be the main draw of it, right? Because you're hitting quite a large audience already. Like there's question marks whether this is really just more like a collector's toy app kind of thing. And the battle stuff is a bit more just something on the side, but having a digital collection that you can kind of show off to your friends, that's quite unique with cool artworks, which is a little bit different as well. Makes it a little bit more sort of casual friendly compared to what we have currently with live. There's always question marks on like, because it's quite obviously there's quite a limited card pool, but the build of the app itself is actually quite a nice experience, I'd like to say. In comparison to what we've experienced so far as competitive players.
There needs to be more skipping going on. Even though the pack experience is immersive, I would love to have skips. I would certainly love that.
Can I open 5 packs at once rather than one by one?
Please. My goodness.
Right.
But what you said, I think what you said there now is perfect though, because the other reflection that I've had is there's 2 people that are at work that have picked it up that have no knowledge of the actual game or whatever. One of them, like having product design and that kind of background, has like the first comment was, wow, this UI is great, this is like really nice, it's clean, I understand everything. And the other, who is a bit of a gamer but doesn't necessarily have don't know what the game or how to play the game, like the core game like we do, said this, like, I feel like I can now move from this into like playing the game that you play, because I get the mechanics might be a bit different or whatever, but I get the fundamentals of I need to knock out Pokemon to get points, which effectively are prizes. But so I think it, like you say, it's hitting both of the marks that it's trying to. I think the other key thing though, and I feel like this has to happen just because, and we've talked about card pool a little bit, but every single card is like attack with no text for X amount of damage. Like they can't do too many sets of like. There's 2 ways they can like theoretically introduce power creep or whatever, is making the numbers bigger or adding text to the cards. And I don't think they can just make the numbers bigger, because I don't think that is interesting to anyone really. So I hope that no matter what, in 6 months' time when we've got a couple more sets, the cards will have more text on them, which I hope will start to alleviate what you've said, Joe, in terms of like there's not much of them. There's no mechanics really at all. It's just doing the number on the card and
the only other thing,
first person to do enough damage.
The only other thing that they can do in an interesting way is similar to how like Misty is the linchpin of water. You could make new card synergies that only works with these new cards, so they can be similar numbers, but you can ramp them with these new cards and that sort of thing. Like that's the only other thing you can do, so that you're essentially just cheating attachments, which seems to be the most important thing in the game right now. Those are like the only things you can do. Or cheating evolution is something we haven't seen. There is still stuff they can do, but because the game is so simple, you're right, there's only so much they can do, and they clearly have a hesitancy to add too many words onto the cards. They don't want to, particularly. If it's hoping only the stage 2s that they want to put that on.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's just because it's the introduction. I'm really hoping that, like I say, in 6 months' time, when everyone knows that a Geodude does 1 for 20, they're able to make a Geodude a bit more interesting or insert fighting type here. But I think that's probably the biggest thing that's missing at the moment. I guess I'm kind of forgiving all of the exact same, like the cards that are literal reprints of each other, just of a different type for now.
I guess the worry is like with Marvel Snap, it did feel like it got out of hand at some points, or eventually like most of us have kind of probably dropped off playing it, right? I still have maybe like one friend who kind of continues to dive deep, but I mean, despite us kind of semi-trashing it, we've got loads of ideas here, Pokemon. You just need
the thing is, I don't see this like, I feel like I played Snap for like 6 to 9 months and was like playing it a lot. I don't see myself doing that with Pokemon. I think I could still be playing it in 9 months, but I think I'm logging in for my pack, and that's it really. And then
your pack, your Wonder Picks, which are pretty cool. I mean, according to online sources, over 10 million people worldwide have downloaded now, so it's like
Yeah, I mean, we know the
incredible.
brand is so big that it's always going to have those sorts of downloads, and it has made insane cash as well in the first 4 or 5 days, whatever. So from that perspective, it's done a lot right. But the actual game, they need to do something to like they've hooked us, and Pokemon's always going to hook a huge portion of people, but it's about that retention that is my worry.
Well, it's opening packs and wonder picks enough, but yeah. Out of interest, did either of you re-roll for your accounts?
I didn't know.
Jack, so you got double Pikachu, immersive Pikachu with.
I really high rolled. Yes.
Damn, okay.
Yeah.
Jack.
Yeah, So I basically the reason one of the reasons why I did was because my first roll was awful, but I also I wanted to record all of the footage just so I had some footage to be able to use if ever we want some, and I almost I wanted to, in case the game completely encapsulated me, I wanted to have my footage to see what my experience was. But yeah, my first roll was complete garbage. I got one.
You got an immersive
EX,
Zard though. That was cool.
But then yeah, my second roll I got an immersive Zard, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. But one of our friends was like, yeah, but it's not competitive. Reroll it. I was like, okay, fine, I'll reroll it. And then yeah, similar to Joe, I hit 2 Pikachus. It wasn't the immersive ones, but it was the normal ones. And I was like, okay, I can build something from this. I can start. Because the biggest thing for me was exactly that, Joe. I wanted to be able to start doing battles and not just get run over by anyone that has a moderately competent deck.
Yeah.
So it almost I wasn't necessarily fussed whether it was the Misty deck or the Mewtwo deck or the Pikachu deck. I just wanted a competent deck.
That feels like the biggest problem is there's these people who are level 11 limbo where their deck isn't good enough to just even go on the ladder and compete. It's do I really have to play against the CPU just loads to have a chance at getting my next wonder pick and just hoping that it's the second copy of this card that I absolutely need to get. So if you're just stuck with bad EXs, I feel like that's a really bad situation.
I mean, we've seen some I'm pretty sure maybe even on Limitless, there's already there's been some huge tournaments already for the
absolutely massive.
The
good news is one of the big issues of weekday actual PTG Live tournaments is that they go on so long. Either they start too early for you to actually begin, or they get you going until gamer hours at night, right? So the fact that it's this very fast game is that you can be done in 2 hours, and it's oh, that was actually a fun experience.
I'm looking at one here. I don't know whether this is entirely accurate, but just according to the numbers, I'm looking at one here that has over 1,000 people registered on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy because Limitless did it over COVID, but we haven't seen anything like that since IRL tournaments have come back. And I think there's probably an element of hype and new shiny thing, and that's why people are doing it. But already having a tournament the cap for this tournament was 1024. It's already at 1,200 players. There's 200 players that are sitting on the waiting list, ready to play this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Does it have a timeline there, Jack, for rounds?
It has. It kind of does.
It has a number of rounds.
40 minutes per round. Yeah, 8 rounds, and then wow, it's 8 rounds, and then the top 16 of a 1,024 player tournament qualify. So that's pretty brutal. That's going to be
have
hard.
they got timing on the round? Have they said
40
minutes per round, which surprises me.
Best of 3.
It's round. I take it back. That's insane. What?
Yeah. That's a lot of your day gone.
I know the in-game timer. I know the in-game timer is that long, but I don't think I've ever gone even in the games in the past few days. I don't think I've ever gone longer than 5 minutes for a game, whether that's winning or losing. Just because
how often can you retreat into other Pokemon to not get knocked out?
There's only a finite number of actions you can actually make.
But
40-minute rounds is wild.
Yeah, $140 for first place though, Joe.
I was thinking, well, yeah, I mean that's fine, but
fine.
I thought one of the big sells was you can be done in a couple of hours, and it's been an experience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that that might partially be down to the fact that there's 1,024 people, so they need some element of checking that all of these people are done. I'm just going to try and find a smaller one to see whether that's consistent with what. Okay, so this one is 15 minutes.
Yeah, see, that
smaller
seems
one of 100
reasonable.
People. So
yeah.
Mind you, I think entry for this one was €25. So again,
€25.
There's crazy
God damn.
Yeah.
There's
the
money
other thing
in
that I
pocket.
think is I think we've already seen it's blown up on YouTube and stuff as well. I don't think anyone didn't expect it to, but I still see views of like videos that were uploaded less than 24 hours ago that are close to 100K, which is crazy given that we would dream of those kinds of numbers for like regular TCG videos.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just like content creators who already have a bit of a following though, Jack? I guess
It will be.
I think I mean a lot of them probably, like one of them saw someone that's doing really well is obviously Spraggles, who already has the massive Unite following. So that's there was another one that, again, we've already mentioned. Marvel Snap was I believe an ex Marvel Snap, or still plays Marvel Snap, but obviously built up a following through that. And whilst we've still all kind of switched off of it, like it still has a relatively big following. So yeah, I think a lot of it will be that, but even Mahone's videos have been doing really well on it, and Mahone typically gathers quite good views anyway. But like some of Mahone's videos on Pocket were reaching his TCG numbers. So again, I think it's testament to people do want the or are interested in the content, which is again good for the longevity of the game, I guess.
The only thing I think about Pocket content is there's only so much variation, it feels like, at the moment. Like everyone's releasing the same video about like the Mankey, right, from the current Lapras event.
This changes everything.
Like yeah, exactly. But everyone's done that video. How many times can you watch the same thing? Because in reality, it's the same information. I'm not saying.
I mean, that's the same as the Pokemon TCG. That's the same as every TCG content creator.
But it feels like right now it's even more of a limited like pool, right? So are people then just watching for their favorite content creators? Well, there's loads of different things.
For me, that's where like the Pocket content is kind of in a different space, because I think compared to Surging Sparks came out on live today, right? And there are, whilst there's nothing crazy meta, there's probably 10 different deck videos you can do as your first deck video. With Pocket, because the card pool is so small, that's where I think it becomes a race, and it's just who gets first usually wins. Whereas that's not like, that's kind of the case with Surging Sparks or whatever, but it's also kind of not the case because one person might do one video and one person might do another deck, and like for the first week or so, you probably actually will see different content. But yeah, I think right now Pocket content is probably just a race, because I've seen like 4 videos on my timeline today about the Lapras event that literally came out yesterday, and all of those videos were done like within an hour of the event coming out, and people just being like, right, editing doesn't matter, professionally doesn't matter. All I want to do is just ship the information and be the first.
Record and get it out. But yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh well, I mean that's a lot of Pocket talk. I'm sure we're going to continue playing and actually continue opening packs and so on. Anyway, plenty of events, but as you guys both mentioned, I think it requires a lot of events going on for me to continue playing on a regular basis. But let's see if like my children might prefer it, for example. But let's touch on obviously our weekend, Joe, and well, effectively your weekend as well, Jack. Obviously you were an enjoyer, hopefully, of the stream and the tournament itself in where the past weekend we had,
which I'm a bit annoyed about.
For the first time, me and Joe ever get paired, and
no one mutes it, do they? Wait, do people mute this?
Are you watching other people's streams? The stream of the streams.
Ditch up.
Right, he's staying silent. He doesn't want to reveal all.
I was trying to think of a times 2 joke about just not watching it and then just times 2ing all the way through.
Yeah.
Right, but Gdańsk Regional happened, so that was always good fun. So yeah, I got an opportunity to cast alongside Joe this weekend, which, as I mentioned, we don't get to do too often, Joe. So how did you find that?
He wants a live review.
Well, I enjoyed it because we can have a laugh.
Too many ums. I don't like this.
I do think that we normally shine better not together because our skill sets are similar, right? So we're either not able to say the thing that we want to say because your co-caster's just said it, so then it's either repetitive or just over-analyzing something, I suppose. Thinking about every single possibility. But yeah, I think we'll look better alongside other people, probably. But obviously, I enjoyed it. And I feel like definitely when we were locking in to those like last couple games, like the final and the top 4 games, where we were hand scouting every single card, we were giving the viewers the best possible picture of what was happening, what was possible. And I think that's only possible when it's both of us, both like fully hawkeyeing every hand that we can, and then
Yeah.
knowing exactly what we do in these matchups and whatnot. So
I mean,
from that
my
perspective,
face was like pressed against our screen.
yeah,
that
we
was
were
in front of
literally
us.
like, if you saw us, we were like this, looking over the game just to see like Alberto's hand, because he would hold it in a angle that made it difficult to do so. But like, you only get that from two analysts at the desk, and I think it still created good, exciting moments as well, which I think is sometimes a criticism of us. But I also think that part of our job is drawing the attention of the most important thing this turn in terms of what you can hit, what you can do. So I think without that, there is sometimes lacking commentary. So I'm always gonna be happy to cast alongside you.
Cheers, mate.
But that's probably why we don't all the time.
No, it was a rarity. I think the way it was described to us described to me was that it was more like a comfort pairing between us, just because obviously we've been spending a lot of time doing this. We talk a lot. And yeah, I mean,
I think we did have a few laughs on the definitely in downtime.
always.
We would joke with each other.
I mean, I came up with some weird phrases. I had squawk and squeeze. I had.
I don't know where that came from.
That one was great.
The thing is, you kept trying to squeeze. Like, what was the
squeezing.
thing of Conte? Yeah, you were trying to squeeze Alberto Conte. I was like, where are we?
I think I had detonate at one point, which said Joe, which was quite amusing. I couldn't come back.
That was just for us. That was just an internal joke.
That's because internally we say detonate a lot. So the fact that you just said detonate on this broadcast,
I could say blow himself up, or could I?
You could just say cursed blast.
I think I was worried I was going to say cursed bomb.
Yeah, that was good.
Well.
That's why I was sending, because I was like, I can't believe you just said detonate.
But yeah, it was good fun. Obviously, we had a lot of fun doing a bit of a round robin with our fellow co-casters as well on day one. We had Amy Wosley and a newbie to the stream, Jesper Eriksson. I'll go to you, Jack. I know you said you had us muted, but did you ever tune into a bit of Jesper? Obviously, a former world champ.
Yeah. So I was given Jesper's past in terms of like experience in the game and success in the game, and also just like his mannerisms about how he talks about the game. I was really interested to see how that translated to casting, and I've got to be honest, I think probably one of the best debuts we've had in a long time. I think I was hopeful that we were going to get that level of analysis and like intricacies that he talks about when he's playing. I was hoping that would translate into his commentary, and I think it did, and more, because I think the other thing that, at least in my experience, when I did a very little bit like 2 years ago, it was difficult to also do like the hype moments and the almost like the showmany moments and the host moments. And he's also got such a good personality for that as well, that he almost dropped into that, where he was able to, there were a couple of situations where he was able to think on his feet and resolve a situation, or when someone was like a little bit lost on their words or whatever, he was able to like bring them back. So yeah, I thought he did a really, really good job. And I'm so glad that like neither part of his personal, like his like quite poppy and like bubbly personality, and also his analysis of the game, neither overtook the other. I think we got like the best of both worlds of what we all know Jesper as like this like super energetic, like high energy kind of person, but also insanely good at the game. And we actually got both of those, and I think it worked really, really well.
You're saying we didn't get the 17-year-old Jesper that we all know and love, and him?
He's grown up now. He
has matured. That's definitely something I've been telling him throughout the whole weekend, and just 100%. Having known him as a person.
He's bearable now. It's insane.
He's bearable. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I told him up front, I think when he did like the live segments, that they were really good. Maybe it was just the opportunity of the type of live segments that he done. He felt just very assured and like in his element. Maybe it comes from his teaching aspect, because he was kind of sat down in like the fan zone area. There's people there. It's always a good laugh. It was a very enjoyable debut. It was kind of fun hanging out with him quite a bit as well, which we don't get to as often. But that's enough of that. Let's actually go into the Gdańsk regional tournament and the actual meta itself, I guess. Where should we start? Should we start day one? Should we start thinking about looking at that first?
Mm-hmm.
Let me just bring that bad boy up. But if you already remember Joe from the weekend and from whatever videos you've already done or will be doing, I'll quickly just run through. So over 1,300 players, 15% of them were Raging Bolt, 12% were Lugia, and then Regidrago was sort of carrying the 7 and 8 percenters at sort of 115 of them. Charizard, Dragapult, and Palkia V-Star sort of was the top 6, as it were. I think I've called them a top 7 if we include Terapagos, and I think Terapagos is actually the top of the best of the rest. Day one as well. Joe, I think we spoke about it across the weekend, so we'll give Jack the floor here, just because it's maybe something a bit more interesting, a bit more fresh perspective. Was this something that you had anticipated going into Gdańsk?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think some of the American results, and then Lille, and basically, I feel like we've almost seen this top 6, top 7 shape every single tournament. Admittedly, it was a much more blatant top 7 in, I think it was Lille, where Terapagos was like by far the 7th, and then everything else was like 3-4%. Whereas this was a little bit more varied. So I think there's more people like noticing what other like now we have that top 7. It happens every format. When you know what you're trying to counter, that's when the Guardies and the Thorns and all of those kinds of decks do start to do better, because you have it's less of like a stab in the dark as to what the actual meta percentage is going to be. So yeah, it wasn't at all surprised by the 7 decks, and wasn't massively surprised by the order of them either. I think Raging Bolt was always going to be number 1 in my head in terms of play rate, just because it consistently has been the whole time. And if anything, after Caleb's win a few weeks ago, it almost like pole vaulted it even more so in my mind, that people were just going to pick up and play the deck and be happy with it. I think even despite its typically quite poor conversion rate, it still seems to just attract. I want to play 3 games in 50 minutes. Ties are so bad nowadays that I almost don't care that maybe the win or like the conversion rate isn't great with this deck. If I play a deck that has a better conversion rate but I tie once, it's basically like losing anyway. So I might as well just play the deck that I'm definitely going to try and get to play 3 games with. Lugia and Regidrago kind of surprised me. I expected it the other way around, given that Regidrago won the week or in Lille. But also, like, again, I'm never surprised at seeing Lugia second, just because it always like just has a following that I guess people flock towards. So yeah, that was kind of probably the biggest surprise. Then like the Charizards, the Dragapults. I expected Terapagos again to be a little bit higher, but that might just be my personal bias. I love playing Terapagos, so it might just be. I think it's far better than Zard, Dragapult, and Palkia, but I don't know whether it's. That might just be personal bias that I think it should be higher. Yeah, Zard, Palkia, and Dragapult, I guess, are all somewhat interchangeable as like the bottom 3 or 4, though. I don't think I'd necessarily thought too much beyond the top 3 in what I expected. But yeah, probably the biggest standout was Regidrago only at 8%. Sorry, I thought was quite low. I expected at least 10 from Regidrago, but I probably expected similar from Lugia, and that was 12. So I guess between them, they hit the 20% mark. So kind of makes sense. Not that I necessarily think the decks have a similar play style or typically attract the same kind of player, but yeah, I know it was kind of like roughly the right numbers, I guess, just maybe not the distribution I expected.
So I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty much well summed up by Jack, to be honest. I mean, there's only sort of 2 major points I think maybe I'll ask Joe to kind of elaborate on. One, we only saw 2 decks over the 10%, which is I think quite an interesting thing to look at. Something we've historically have had for the last few weeks now. We've had sort of 3-4 decks in that sort of range. Yes, the rest are relatively close. But yeah, Regidrago not going up in play is actually quite surprising. And, well, I guess for Joe, what makes Terapagos not yet been able to break that first day page? I mean, I think it was on the first day page for Louisville. But I think for Lille and subsequently Gdańsk, maybe it's a European thing, but why is it lagging behind?
I don't know. Maybe just a lack of like deep runs, I guess. Like it's done well in some of the non-European, non-US tournaments, right? I think Gabe maybe got a top 8 with it. But beyond that, it didn't really have those like victories that kind of you need that sort of jolt in the arm to be like, oh, this is good enough to beat everything. And I'm similar to Jack, where I'm stunned that it's not on day 1. I think it's like a far superior play to Charizard and Bolt and Palkia, so I agree with that as well. that I just think it should be played. But I don't know. It's also like a complex archetype where you're stringing together combos, and some people might be off-put by that when they're just intimidated by a turn where they're searching the deck for 5 specific cards of knockdown Pidgeots. And if they do that wrong, they just lose the game. Because inherently, Terapagos' damage output is an issue. It can sometimes back you into a corner if you're not blasting correctly, and weaving like together your Thornton play is oftentimes your win condition. So these are the things that maybe put people off in terms of mass appeal. But I would be surprised if the LAIC didn't have it as at least the 6th best deck, if not more popular.
Yeah, no, I mean it's one of those where there's so many combo pieces, similar to kind of the decks we've played before, Joe, that sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to keep track of things. I'm sure, unfortunately, we did see like a bit of a slight missequence by like a stream player, by Caleb, I think it was, with the Terapagos deck.
Yeah,
where
he
got a
plonked
bit
down
ahead
and
of
knocked
himself.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm sure like we've seen players either side of us when we've been playing before like make that mistake as well.
I certainly have.
Saying no names, of course, but it's kind of one of those things where there's so many pieces of the puzzle that you have to kind of fit together. It can become quite a stressful play at times.
Yeah, it's a full focus deck from turn 1 until the last turn. It's very skill rewarding, but also like requires entire like full attention, because the deck itself doesn't do that much unless you're stringing the combos together. So it definitely is high attention, difficult to pilot deck. The big upside is that it's super duper consistent in just that you need so little to get so much from fan rotom and whatnot, which is really big, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I think it should be touched on, at least for the day one, the remaining 3 just below Terapagos was, well, according to our graphic, was Gardevoir EX, but we know that that's a bucket of Gardevoir and Burnett Gardevoir decks as well, so that's quite an interesting uptick. We know it's a very Polish deck. I mean, that's probably not the best way of calling it, but it originated from sort of a lot of the Polish players playing Burnett, and it's kind of seen a massive uptick. And then Iron Thorns, as Snorlax control, maybe sometimes a little bit more linear, a bit more simple, shut down your opponent, or have a bit more control over your opponent's game plans. And yeah, they kind of were the 6 and other 5% as well. Unclassified we kind of ignore because loads of decks are in there. We know Gouging Fire is in there. We know a few other things are tinkering away over there as well. But heading into day 2 then, obviously we saw quite a big change. We saw a massive uptick from the 6% of Terapagos to 14% of day 2. So there was 117 players in the Masters Division. So 16 Terapagos EX Dustwild decks. Raging Bolt was second at 12%. Lugia dropped a couple of percent as well to 10. Regidrago, rough uptick to 10. Gardevoir, Burnett, 11. Iron Thorns up to 10 players as well. So again, any real surprises there? Are we surprised to see Iron Thorns finally make it back onto a day 2 graphic into the top 6?
Yeah, I'm not stunned, because I was actually saying on broadcast quite a few times that the top 3 decks are basically like a throwback to the World Championships, where it's Bolt, Lugia, and Drago. And that's when we identified Iron Thorns was at its best going into Worlds, and actually it meant it was relatively popular in the day 1 of the World Championships.
Substitute Drago for Charizard, I guess, I think. Because I found Drago really hard as a matchup when I played Iron Thorns.
Yeah, I mean, maybe into Worlds
guess,
there was more Goodra, and there's probably less Goodra
Not Drago,
now.
So Charizard is what I meant to say. A stage 2 deck, but somehow when I faced I'm going nuts. You said Drago. I'm thinking Dragapult.
Yeah, Dragapult is terrible. Dragapult is a terrible matchup for you, which you are trying to dodge, and that's still an issue for the Thorns. Charizard's still manageable, right? That's a bit catchery flippy more than hammer flip.
That's a
hammerhead. Yeah, it's a bit of both, right? It's if you can lost zone and hunt the boys oftentimes, because Zard is like engineless most of the time, so it doesn't really do anything when you're judge spamming them. But yeah, I think Thorns is a fine deck. You're still dodging, right? That's still the same issue with Thorns, where you're not actually that great into a bolt. Sometimes you just catch them cold on a weak hand and you can like storm through. But that never feels great, especially with Bravery Charms. They just have much more time against you now, which is a bit rough. But I think, yeah, obviously you laugh at Lugia. You're fine into Drago and Zard. You're okay into Palk as well. you're pretty bad into Terapagos now that Boof's around, but sometimes you can still like make it difficult for them and run them out of energy. But yeah, I think you should be losing to Terapagos. So it's a dodge and weave deck for sure, but it's just awkward for stuff. Like sometimes you just beat matchups you shouldn't because their hand just happens to be griefed by you.
I guess, Jack, other than Regidrago V-Star as a deck, it feels like a lot of the format is a bit of a bob and weave format anyway, right? Every deck seems to want to dodge a matchup. So you're always playing matchup.
Yeah.
Is that the case if you were going into a tournament like this?
I think that's why you kind of mentioned that it's a much more even distribution of decks on day one. I think that's kind of why we have that distribution, is because there's not necessarily like there's no whilst there is probably a right play, there's not necessarily it's not as clear cut because it is maybe a little bit more based on what you need to dodge and weave, and therefore like it's not like people want to super commit to a deck that is much higher in power level than anything else because all of the decks still inherently lose to something or other, which kind of happens anyway. But when it's in like a matchup roulette style way, that's when I feel like we see 8s and 7% across the board rather than what we initially saw at the start of the format, which was some 15s, 14s, and 13s, and then everything else that like it feels like they've crept up and the others have crept down. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at. The other thing that, again, I guess, as a bit of a testament to Terapagos and what Joe said about it being incredibly high skill ceiling, this is at least the second tournament because I'm pretty sure it happened in the first Shadow Crown tournament, but maybe other tournaments that it shot up to the most played in day two. And I think, again, that is entirely testament to what Joe said in terms of if you can play the deck and get those sequences and combos well, you can do some insanely powerful things even with very limited damage output. It has such huge potential in terms of like board wipes and winning games from basically nowhere with things like Thornton, Briar, all of the crazy power level cards that you see people like worry about and complain about and things like that. When actually when you're able to tutor them into the right combos and use the right ones at the right time, and I think that's why we typically see the massive uptick of it is because the people that are playing it are the dedicated pilots, and therefore the dedicated pilots are the ones that know all of the intricacies, and therefore they just naturally make their way up through the ranks and into day two. So yeah, I'm not massively surprised about Terapagos. I guess I was maybe surprised it being first again, given that it didn't even make the day one like first graphic. I probably expected it to be at least on the first graphic on day two, but maybe not first. Raging Bolt again probably had a better conversion rate than I was expecting given past conversion rates. It actually made it to second on the graphic when sometimes it doesn't even feature. So that's unsurprising. But yeah, it felt like everything else was fairly consistent. Lugia, Regidrago both did okay until you then get into the more countery picks like the Gardevoir Bonnets, the Iron Thorns, the Snorlaxes and stuff like that, which I think was kind of a bit of the story of the tournament. And I guess as we move into the top 8, like kind of what happened with the top 8, all of a sudden there was a lot of archetypes that I think probably, like if you told me the top 8 was going to have like 2 Thorns, Bonnets, Snorlaxes, I would have been like, well, what about all of the Raging Bolts that just make it there because they take 6 prizes before anyone else because it's just the hyper aggro stuff. So I felt like that kind of ended up being the story of the tournament, is the counter picks actually were the picks to play this weekend and like really, really benefited, even though it was Drago that still won and it was Terapagos in the final. There was still a lot of representation from like counter decks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just on the best of the rest day 2 decks at the moment. So I mean, in the 4 or 5%, you've got Lost Zone Box, which I think stuck around that sort of figure. Snorlax Control, there were 6 people piloting it. Charizard EX obviously fell off. Dragapult EX fell off down to only 3 players. And then other sort of control matchups like Mimikyu Control was sort of there as well. And then, of course, that very interesting. It says Terapagos Noctowl, but it's like Terapagos Palkia Noctowl. Me and Joe obviously know it very intimately. 3 of them specifically in this tournament were that kind of jet energy version. I'm sure Joe's going to put some time into actually mucking about with that as well. And certainly. One was a bit more closer to home from what we played. I know that was Jonathan Sharp playing with that deck as well. But yeah, I don't think it's sort of anything too crazy, and I'm sure we'll touch on this in a bit more detail in a moment. But I think the Bonnet Gardevoir deck, is it here to stay? Is it actually a threat? I mean, obviously the 2 of them got into top 8 as we've just mentioned, but no one's ever really. It's felt like no one's really ever put enough time into it. outside of the Polish contingent of players. Obviously, it was Magnus Pedersen who picked it up and carried it to a top 4 finish as well. But,
so whenever I've picked up and played this, I feel like it is still super shaky on consistency, which is a worry. And we actually saw like Mateusz, as soon as he lost a game, he had to play at like breakneck speed whilst not making a mistake. So I don't think masses will pick it up still. So I think you can disrespect it generally, but just sort of know what its tricks are. Because we saw on stream that people were just not playing correctly against Burnett. There was a player that was just like not even doing basic stuff like Ultra Ball before passing. You know, like the simple stuff you can do to give yourself a way better chance. And I think there's still
play items when you can.
Crazy, I know. Like play them while they glow. You know, it's so simple. But just like
there's
also
no
not
automatic glow in live play, Joe. Unfortunately,
but just stuff like not attacking with Squawkabilly and then getting trapped, and then you're like, oh, I'm an idiot because I can't play any of these switches and I'm passing for 5 turns now for no reason. Or I benched lists and that's their win con all along. Like there was so much dumb stuff that still happens, but like we know what Burnett does. We should know at this point what item lock is trying to do, and you should know now that it's basically a Monkey Dory deck, so it finds its value by just buying turns here, there, or everywhere. So just play accordingly to that, and you should like. I don't think it's incredibly powerful. I really don't. I think it hinges a lot of the time on its churro turn, like buying back so much tempo that you can like recover and then trap again for a while. So it's just about getting yourself in positions where you can chain attacks. As long as you're chaining attacks, their deck should just be flopping.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. No, I appreciate that. I think that's probably my kind of feel on it. In my mind, it feels so strong, right? Item lock is such a powerful concept in the Pokemon trading.
It's just so shaky. Like its opening turns are like you're playing 4 Curlier and you're playing 3 Tracking Shoes to try and make it bearable, but it's still just so shaky early game. And there are so many decks that can, as long as the shop it doesn't randomly flip heads, like they can just be annihilating your board straight away, and then it just feels like a terrible deck.
Do I feel like a lot of players once that lock is in place and there's suddenly the second Monkey Dory hits after a Churro has been taken out, like removed, like an additional Curlier that's no longer needed.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of felt like what we saw in stream was a lot of players just continued playing despite that lock already being there. You know, they could. I know Talk
specifically did, but it benefited him to keep playing that game.
Yeah,
but
sure,
I think the masses is what you're getting to, is that they're not helping themselves in terms of actually winning a best of 3 or getting a tie out of that situation. I think there definitely will be those spots where people again are not playing correctly into the matchup.
All right, well, that was the meta of Gdańsk, of course. Let's have a quick look now. I'm just on the Limitless sort of final rankings page. We know it was a clean cut, which is always interesting as a topic of discussion on the Twitterverse and just generally. But it was nice to see a bit of a clean cut. It was we already kind of mentioned a bit of the decks that were actually made it into the top 8. We'll cover the players in a bit as well, but like you said, it was 2 Regidragos, 1 Terapagos EX Dustoir deck, 2 Burnett's Gardevoirs, and then 2 Iron Thorns, and then finally bringing up the rear was that sort of 1 Snorlax as well. So the way I saw it, there was like 5 control archetypes, you know, with the Iron Thorns, the Burnett's, Item Lock, and the Snorlax, and then you got the Regidrago obviously having what fresh off the wins from Lille, and then the other one's Tord Reklev. I don't know how else to kind of determine that, but
his lists respect all the control nonsense.
Very much so. I mean, some really cool, interesting players that we got to see in the top 8 as well. So, of course, Alberto Conte was there with his Regidrago V-Star, Tord Reklev, Terapagos EX, Daniel Magda, you know, and first year Masters who had a finalist at the NAIC, and I think you said you casted that match, didn't you, Joe?
Yeah, he innovated the secret box in Snorlax.
Genius. Oh, right, okay, there you go. And I also took away any chance for him to give a shout out on the stream, which was quite amusing.
Terrible.
I don't know, that might have been one point that you were muted, Jack, but he gave one shout out, and then I was like, okay, I've been told to throw back, so I'm throwing back, and then right in the end, you just hear, can I just do another shout out, and then it just like instantly goes. And I'm like, poor kid. And I was like, he just needs to win one more time, and he'll get to do whatever shower he wants. And then he's
gonna blame you for that eternally as well, because he didn't have the in-ear that you did, so he just thinks you've been a complete arse and just been like, yeah, okay, that's enough. Back to the desk. So
Alex
you've made
he's a woman.
Yeah,
You've made an enemy there.
Exactly. It's a bit of a worry. It was quite amusing his interview, actually. I mean, just like pulling out just a couple of key things, which is like, it was kind of like he put a target on Tord, like I'm literally coming for you, and just obviously it didn't quite.
Good mentality. I like that.
Yeah,
To be fair,
yeah, strong.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Then we had former world champs in Magnus Pedersen with that Bennett guard of our list, Matesh. Obviously we saw him a couple of times on stream. Matthias Jakobsen and Steve Lawson, which is obviously nice to kind of give a shout out to Steve because I think we've all come across Steve. He's lovely, right? I've always
describe him as a good egg. That's the only way I can describe Steve.
Did you get good egg out on stream?
Yeah, I probably said it 2 or 3 times. I don't know why, but that's just stuck in my head, and I'm calling everyone good eggs at the moment.
I think it might have been a Pokemon before, but yeah, it was
when
nice
when the names were kind of finalized and I saw the name, I was like, right, okay. I knew, even though I didn't know, I knew the decks, I knew the names, I didn't know who was playing what. But as soon as I heard Thorns, I was like, okay, Steve Lawson's playing Thorns, and I was like, regardless, I'm rooting for Steve to win this tournament. He's
he came backstage. We had such a funny moment where he was like, "What am I doing here?"
Yeah, he's like, this run has to end here, surely.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Steve, he fell to Daniel Magda in that top 8 match.
That was a hard list to play against. Daniel had both Haxorus and Gudra, which is making the Drago matchup not close, I think, compared to a regular list, which has like awkward attacks into Thorns.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, this is where we're going to see some nuances between the lists, which is kind of cool, actually. Maybe less so some of the others, like the Bennett card of us. I think there's only like 1 or 2 card difference. But yeah, as you mentioned, a bit of a different list of attackers in Daniel's version in comparison to Alberto's, for example. Oh, I've just gone from light mode to dark mode very quickly. But yeah, so Steve fell in top 8. Alex Scopini, I think, lost to Tord Recklove in top 8 with the Snorlax list. And Tejas Jackson lost to Alberto Conti. And then we had, I think, Joe coined the Burnett brothers were battling it out in top 8.
They're not even brothers. It's a terrible coin. I should have come up with something better.
Anything that was BB, I think. No, so that was quite amusing. That unfortunately I had to face one another. And then in top 4, which for the first time, because we had a clean cut, we actually showed both top 4 games. I don't know if it was to the detriment of the stream in the end, because there was some quite long games and matches that were featured in the end.
The full 75 plus turns back to back.
It was awkward. It was awkward because of the matchups. But I actually said at the time when I was watching the stream to some of the people that I was chatting with at the time, I was like, it's really nice to see, because I love that about ICs. I love that about Worlds. I love being able to see both sides of the bracket. I actually wish we could, like, parking the fact that I just want to see more rounds regardless. I actually think, like, I would love to see more of top cut anyway. Now, being able to see top 8, like, and more top 8 is unrealistic, but I really liked at least being able to see both sides of top 4, so you could develop a story for both finalists rather than just naturally having like innate favor towards one just because you'd watched them just win or whatever. So I as someone who was just watching the stream rather than like casting or playing or whatever, I thought it was a really, really positive change and nice, like a really nice viewer experience as well to, I guess, set up the final. Like you say, bit awkward that I guess it was like it made it
we got punished for keeping the around, basically. Yeah.
I think backstage we were championing to have both top 4 games shown just because we had the time, and we're like, oh yeah, it was great.
It was essentially like lose a round or show both top 4s, and
and
I'm glad it worked out the way it did,
because the top 8 game that we did show ended early, and the Alberto Conti top 8 game ended early. We could show that side of the bracket sooner. And then we still ended up being 275 minutes back to back from the top 4 into the final.
Yeah, anyway. It was all going so well until the end.
But no, so that was good fun. Obviously, that went. Me and Joe got to do Alberto against Daniel. Obviously, that was a Regidrago V-Star mirror match. Very strange. It was a bit back and forth. We were worried, or I was worried that Alberto. I think this is where I squawk and squeezed. But Alberto came out. I was worried he was only going to get to this point again, like he did in Lille.
I'm pretty sure that was a throw fest as well. I'm pretty sure both players tried to not win that series at different points.
Yeah, I think Daniel made a really weird play where he chose not to attack or go for the attack, right?
Yeah, he chose not to. He chose not to V-star digging for an E-switch. He just chose to clever and pass and instantly lost because of it. And then Alberto in the second
prime
game
captured the only Reggie
prime captured into to then clever rather than take out or at least pre-damage something. And then Alberto did that weird game where he like prized a rod but then didn't V-star back resources to have anything more than just a Radzard. And he was saying, I'm banking on Daniel playing badly into this turn.
Yeah, that's
because otherwise I have no win condition whatsoever. I'm just like shaking your hand right now because you've just announced an attack on my active Pokemon.
No way to attack for Alberto outside of that Radzard.
I mean,
remaining.
Obviously that's like a caster vision situation where like
agreed.
Maybe that's just such a next level play that's so far above my brain where Alberto's making this play and making Daniel think that this is fine for him, I suppose. And I guess you're just naturally trained to be like, I don't want to take a one prize or I want to win in 2 attacks, so I won't do this. And, you know, we knew a rod was in the prizes, but I still feel like very often there, if Daniel's hand just isn't good, he just takes that prize because he has to. That's what's so scuffed. You're hoping that someone's hand is good enough and they're trying to play like you know what you're doing and that they're trying to win in as few attacks as possible, that they take something else. And that's so, like, for me, that's just such weird mental gymnastics that, you know, maybe that's why I'm a caster and not the sub-stage.
You went there, did you?
It's such weird logic to me. I'm like, this is such a strange solution.
I think that's the most vivid memory I have of like the regionals this weekend was the conversation that you and Alex were having about, like, you were basically
the second
like
card of his V-Star power was the biggest debate, I think.
You were like, I think I remember the phrase something like, this could go so wrong or something. And like, that was almost when I tuned in as to like, oh, what's happened here? And all of a sudden there's a Radzard with 3 energy. And I'm like, oh, like.
Because he didn't even take a grass.
It's so weird for Radzard.
And I was like, Vessel! I was like, that is omega greed. Like, if at least you take grass, you can go Drago first and still have Zard as a backup. But it's like, holy, he just threw chips in at that point, and I was blinking.
Doesn't matter. The all-in play worked and paid off. Obviously, he made it into the final, and Tord overcome the Bennett Gardevoir deck that he lost to in Swiss, which was again quite interesting. But it felt like once Tord took game 1, a game 2 scenario for Magnus, because it's such quite a slow, grindy deck, and Tord actually ended up taking out one of the Monkey Dories, which slowed down the win con of Magnus as well.
Yeah, he just randomly couldn't find Luminous, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, he dug to like the bottom couple of cards, but
3 cards, and there was 2 there.
He was looking for it for quite a long time, but I think that it just didn't come.
But Tord also like giga low rolled in his Swiss game that made it look like the matchup was really favored for Bennett, but it's actually just like not favored for Bennett, I would say. Do
you reckon he had any outs to move out of the active position, Joe?
See, that was my only gripe with Jesper. I really agree that he ticks so many boxes.
Yeah.
As a caster from a new player, from a debut perspective, he did completely smash it, and I have nothing against that. But from my thinking of how he would do this weekend, he did worse on analysis and way substantially better as like just being natural and hosty and like good camera presence and all this other stuff. Like he did some segments that were always that I don't think I'll ever do as well as him. Like that fan zone segment, I just don't think that happens if it's me, to be honest with you. I just don't think I can pull that off. But then also I'm there thinking he's this crazy broken world champion that still is at the top of his game, but he was making some like bad calls in commentary at times in terms of analysis, which was frustrating to me. And specifically that I think was his worst game, where he misquoted Tord's deck lists, and that's just reading. So you should be able to read a 2-2 Pidgeot line, but he called it a 101, then called it a 102, to then eventually see that it's a 202 Pidgeot. And then also he didn't realize that Tord had Boss, Thornton, Churro, Penny, and all of these were outs to retreat stuff, and he had essentially announced that Tord was locked like 3 times, and on that exact same turn, Tord got out of a way to retreat. So that was definitely Jesper's weakest round from analysis.
I think sometimes when you're casting, you kind of end up going down a bit of a pigeonhole, and I kind of think he just kind of he dove like head first.
Yeah. But even just like at the very start of that game, he was like, Boufflant's the key to the matchup, and Boufflant is actually like towards loss condition that he had to put into play in that specific situation. So it's like, yeah, there was just some weird analysis going on. I mean,
that's kind of interesting though, because Tord did put down Boufflants against Magnus. Maybe it was more game two.
It's the classic. Yeah, it's a classic like time and place thing. Whereas Jesper was framing it as like, you absolutely need to have this, and even Tord just like researched one away straight away, and they just randomly got into a Night Stretcher and played Night Stretcher because it was a glowing card before they weren't glowing anymore, and Jesper was trying to like justify like, yes, this Boufflant is crucial. I'm going to be a very, very stern critic on analysis because that's what I feel like the only thing that I can bring to the stream. So obviously, like, I made a couple blunders on the stream as well. Like I said, someone could squawk on turn 2 of the game, for example, which is just stupid because they passed on turn 1 essentially and did nothing. And yeah, I mentioned that like someone was retreating into Klefki to stop Ironthorn so that they could Greninja, but that doesn't work because there's a Klefki in the active. So I obviously made a few mistakes myself that I'm going to beat myself up for. But yeah, just because I didn't really say my piece on Jesper, I thought he was insanely good just from charisma and camera presence and all that stuff. And his analysis is going to get better because we know he's a great player. But I think there were times where he lost track of games, which was something I wasn't expecting from him.
There we go. Some little pointers for you, Jesper, if you ever listen to this.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to... so I want to reach out to him because I'll give him very specific game by game, minute by minute feedback, which I've done for a few of the other casters as well. So
Joe whips out this scroll, which is
No, I will literally do that on like sentence 1 through 5 if you want to, because that's the detail that I want to go into.
Yeah, I know you're obviously well respected. You've given some feedback to a lot of people, even the US cast as well. But let's rate it back in a little bit. Obviously, we just started digging into yesterday. We'll because we started talking about Tor's deck list. And obviously we've spoken about Terapagos. Is this the way to play Terapagos going forward? Will you have to consistently respect control the same way Tor does going forward? Jack, as we said, 1 Fortin, 1 Penny, 1 Churro, Powpad. Is this the way? He only plays 201 Dustwall line, which is kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, so I actually tonight have played. So I'd played a lot of, I think, the initial list that he played in the first. It must have been. I think you said it was Dorman. It must have been Dorman.
It was Dorman.
Yeah.
He
and really
Lost Box, I think.
Really enjoyed that list. I've played a few games since of like the new list that has a few more text, and I think it definitely feels diluted in terms of power level. I think you have to draw a little bit better but we know this is what Tor does, right? He likes to have a win condition into every matchup, and he's the caliber of player that can see lines that are more diluted that players like me can't, but he can, and it works for him. I think the new list is a little bit harder to pick up and play. Not that the deck is easy to pick up and play anyway, but like I almost think it's even harder given that, you know, your access to Dusknoir is a lot more limited. There's one less stretcher in the list, so you're like, again, all of that is just basically like I very much think of the deck as actually just almost like a Dusknoir farm, and it's one of the best decks at basically breaking Dusknoir, right? But that's what he's had to eat into to still be able to play the Buffalamps and to still be able to play all of these cards that like beat all of the other matchups. And I think it, for me at least, you know, having played a few games with the old list and now a few games with the new list, I definitely felt like there was more situations where I was like, oh, there's a random penny here rather than like a Dusknoir, which I could just candy into play and win the game here. And like, it goes back to the deck being very high skill ceiling, and that there's micro decisions that you don't realize that you make on turn 1 that actually lose you the game on turn 5. I think this list leans into them more because there's way more one-offs and things like that. As to whether it's the way to play it, I think it's a difficult call because, again, I think it probably depends on your preference as a player. I think I would potentially look at going back to a more traditional, or like the list from a few weeks ago, and maybe accept that some of these matchups aren't ones that I'm going to be hitting anymore, or aren't the ones that I'm going to be favorable into anymore, or have an answer to anymore. But because my skill ceiling as a player is lower, therefore I want a more powerful deck to try and win the matchups that I can win, rather than try and find the lines in the matchups that are a bit harder now because I'm playing a more diluted card pool. That being said, obviously it got him second place, so it's obviously a very good list, and it's still like 54, 55 cards the same list, so it's not like it's like a massive reinvention of the wheel. But just in the handful of games I've played with it literally tonight, just because the like Surging Sparks came out and I just wanted to hop on the ladder, it definitely felt like combos were not as obvious to me as they were with the old list. And again, testament to the skill ceiling of the deck and the pilot of the pilot of the deck and the skill ceiling of the player. But I think it makes it a lot harder to pick up and play. Probably does give you more percentage points into the more niche matchups, the control matchups, and like we've seen that with all of like towards Charizard lists. He wants to win. He wants to have a condition in every single matchup, and he's the kind of player that just needs one card to then weave a line into every single matchup. Doesn't need to like dedicate a lot of space. But for me personally, I'm not that caliber of player, so I almost like need to put the training wheels back on a little bit more and have an extra Duskull, have an extra Dusknoir, have an extra Stretcher, and actually then be able to do those really powerful plays that we know Terapagos can do, and maybe you just end up sacking off or having a much harder time and having an early lunch against, the Snorlaxes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess the only other interesting aspect of this that we don't see too often is he obviously increases Pidgeot counts as well. I think he's up to 202, right?
I think, was it 202? How many was it?
I don't know. 102, 101. Nah,
102.
00. But I think it's testament when you have a conversation with Torn, and I think I asked him a couple of things. I made the joke very often about if you hit Fan Rotom, you're often in a very good spot and you often would win games. His view is if you get Pidgeot EX, you're in the same sort of position. That's why he kind of very heavily goes down that route very quickly and very early on. And again, testament to some of the decks that we've seen him play before with Pidgeot EXs and stuff like that. I think it's maybe it was just the deck for this tournament. I'm not really too sure. Maybe it's a bit too heavy in some of those extra cards, like the 1 penny, the 1 Turos, the 1 Fortin. I mean, they're all cards I'd love to have, but fitting them all in, plus the Bouffalants, is kind of an interesting direction to take it. And I'm sure we'll see some more innovation ahead of LAIC as well. Joe, I don't know if you've got anything else to say on that, really.
I think minus pad plus Dusknoir and it's perfect 60. That's my
perfect.
Thought. I think he plays pad just so that he can beat stuff. Have the resources to not be in too much headache. I think pad is mildly worse than penny, but it's either penny or pad that goes, and then it's plus Dusk, and I'm happy. So happy playing that list.
Fair enough. All right. Well, okay. Well, we know that the final was commentated by yours truly and Joe Bernard as well. We obviously had Alberto Conte and Tord as the final boss in that final. It was great to see Alberto take down a tournament. I think everyone sort of waxed lyrical about how great of a player he is since he's been able to join the Pokemon trading card game. Very consistent player, very much a Tina enjoyer, Giratina V star enjoyer. And he's been able to take down a tournament with a Giratina V star in his list. I mean, he's had to play Regidrago V star to do it. Did he play the same list that he did in Lille? It doesn't look like it.
No, it's one card different. He cut Penny for Switch.
There you go. Well, any thoughts on that? I mean, like I said, it was kind of a strange game. I don't think Tor drew too well. I think it's one of the first things a lot of us can pick up on.
Just as a kind of a bit of side analysis, I'll let you talk a little bit more about the deck, Joe. But just as like I said, a side analysis. What stacked top four? You've got Tord. You've got someone who came second at NAIC in seniors this year. You've got Magnus Pedersen, who's a seniors world champion and has proved he can do well in the Masters division as well, playing an off-brand archetype. The only thing that obviously you said earlier on is Veneta deck. I think the only counterpoint to what you've said, Joe, is I think I agree that I think the deck feels pretty fragile, but I think there will be a lot more players looking twice at it now. Someone like Magnus Pedersen is picking it up, and it's not just Matthias every week doing it, which we know, who we know can do it every time. So that was really impressive. And then you've got Alberto, who basically is really blown up post-COVID and has had an incredibly impressive result post-COVID, consistently getting better and better and better, and literally week on week, tournament on tournament, getting better and better. even over the past 3 tournaments. So yeah, I'll shut up a little bit about the deck, but what like I just thought the top 4 was unbelievably stacked in terms of like it was an IC level top 4 in my opinion, which is amazing to see for one, a regional, but two, the new tournament structure that still it is rewarding to the good players out there. It's not like there's the good players are still being rewarded with the new tournament structure.
Yeah, there's always that fear when there's less rounds that there's more randomness and people just randomly get there that maybe would not have with 2 more rounds of play. But it's good. Yeah, like you said, it's fantastic to see the level of play that can still be demonstrated at these tournaments. And Alberto, yeah, just very, very strong player. Really like the list as well. Like it's just a no-nonsense list, really, isn't it?
No tricks with the knocked out.
No tricks.
Like that, right?
Playing third Iono, which is oftentimes cut for stuff. Yeah, just a very straightforward list, and says that the attacks that I have at my disposal are good enough. And on stream a few times, it wasn't just him. He did a really, really good clever like mid game to not have to V-star power in one of his games, which I think completely won him that set.
Who was mocking us about that?
I think Luke was saying we were like bigging it up like it was the best player in the world. But it was probably because I was like in the zone thinking so often that like 2 more prizes are being taken here and you'd be in trouble here if you had to V-star power now, and then there's that window of opportunity for Tord. But he literally just like shut Tord out by going grasp for a turn, which is so silly. So very, very cool play from him, definitely in the final. And it was just hilarious to see that every opening deck search, the first thing he'd find is Tina V-star and put it at the front of his deck or pop it out. He's just a good joker at the same time as well.
He's a showman as well. He knows the personality he's built. Yeah,
and one of that's just automatic. Like he doesn't without thinking. Like he's obviously looking at his attackers, but no, is he? Do you reckon?
He's definitely doing it for the crowd, and it worked. He's it's great that you can just still have that little bit of fun, even though you're in obviously this pressure cooker of trying to not lose 3K and get your first regional win and get your world's invite. Yeah. So fair play to him. Very chill guy.
I'm not too sure there's much else to talk about with Alberto taking down a regional championship here. Like I said, automatic invite in the bag. From 4th to 1st, from tournament to tournament, which is kind of cray as well. But yeah, he was able to overcome Tord Rec Level, which we know we'll see Tord again, somewhere in some way, shape or form. But just with that, I guess there's not really too much more we can cover. We'll probably cover like a bit of LAIC next week. We'll see if Rab is up for it. If not, we'll try and rope in some more people again, like Jack here. Very kind to join us. One final thoughts, if you were going to play LAIC, if it was this weekend, what would you both play?
Great question.
Again, probably respecting that I may not have as stellar of a result as Tord, I would probably still play Terapagos just because it's the deck I have the most fun with. And like I say, I think it's being massively underrepresented in terms of its power level. So I think whilst I definitely would not feel comfortable in saying I would get a day 2 with it or whatever, I just have so much fun with the deck, so I'd probably just stick to that. Probably stick to that.
I would go Raging Bolt. I'm saying it.
Would you? Right, early predictions for Rage. That sounds like one of like Rab's. I've been backing Roaring Moon this whole time. It's kind of what it's kind of the vibes I was getting from Joe just then. I think I would just submit Regidrago and just take the many sort of 50-50 type matchups where I can. It just feels like the deck's just so good. It has been for so long. It's still just in the hands of the right player. Similar to Terapagos, where it has like very high level players just playing those types of decks, where it's like you don't really have in reality an auto loss to too much. So yeah, that's my 2 pence there. Any last things? Last weekend plans for this weekend? Crazy. I know. More poke? No.
Well, yeah. Set dropped today, mate. Have you been on to play any Surging Sparks yet, Alex?
No, I've been playing Pocket.
What's the first thing you're gonna be playing? Sparks.
Lost Pikachu is something I want to be walking around with. I think Pikachu is very, very fun, just with that innate ability that it has. And Lost Box, although Regidrago is still about, I feel like with Pikachu it might be something I'd really enjoy. Jack, have you actually played much beyond just playing an old deck into the new format?
I haven't put a new card into a deck.
Have you faced anything interesting?
I've faced a few Pikachu's.
Yeah.
And given the, I don't know what time, I don't know whether it used to be 6 p.m. like UK time, so I don't know whether it still is the same, but I was facing Pikachu straight away, which is, again, if we can give live a credit, it's how quickly you can actually access cards these days, which is cool because usually you'd hit like one Pikachu and then like 20 decks of just old decks and people trying to grind packs or whatever. So that's a positive.
Were you
I
able
guess.
to each and every time knock out a Pikachu in one hit like you're not supposed to?
Absolutely not. The Pikachu. I've beaten a Pikachu, but I definitely lost to a Pikachu with Terapagos again. But that's exactly the example, right? I'm so used to the training wheels 2 Dust Noir, 3 Duskulls that all of a sudden I couldn't weave the combo together because it was a lot less accessible. And actually, like, it doesn't matter that Pikachu only has 200 health; it technically has 1,000 health when you can't knock it out. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think if I were playing a new deck. The deck I had the most fun with in our early testing was like a Pikachu, Magneton, Miraidon, Joltik kind of thing that I know Joe played with a little bit today. And I think you said it was like middling today, Joe, but you feel like the list can be refined. So that's actually where I want to probably play because I think the set's relatively low power level overall, but that's like the one, I feel like that's the one archetype that's new in a way that actually has legs potentially of being a relevant archetype, maybe only tier 2 or whatever. But yeah, that was the most fun I had that weekend that me and Joe played some Surging Sparks just because it had options going first, options going second. The Magneton, even though it doesn't put 13 damage counters on something, still gives you like pretty good prize control over then being able to do things like Counter Catcher or Defiance Band or Iona or whatever. So not as broken as Dusknoir, obviously, but like prize control in any which way is inherently broken when you have cards like Counter Catcher and stuff in format. So, yeah, I think that's probably my number one deck, and probably realistically the only deck I will actually put huge amounts of time into because I think everything else is relatively low power level, which is kind of sad because I don't like it when sets don't do anything. Given that like January sets also typically don't do much, we could have this kind of format for like 3 or 4 months, which is what we were
everyone's
hoping
waiting
to
in
avoid.
anticipation for like all of the trainers Pokemon and that kind of stuff to eventually come out. It's like that's like
yeah,
that's
exactly.
like April time, right?
I think my suspicion is it will be February for EUIC.
Really?
I think there is a chance that EUIC will be rotation and we'll get back to having a February set.
That'll be awesome.
Right, so it means that we might
be broke by
first.
Jan, Jack. We're gonna be broke after the Eevee sets.
Yeah, no, I know. It's awful. I haven't even bought any Surging Sparks yet. That's a Pikachu set. That's going to go to the moon too.
I saw that ETBs are sold out, obviously.
Yeah, I did manage to get booster boxes before they sold out. So I'm going to have to wait until they're back in stock and try and get one somewhere maybe.
Joe,
I think
other decks?
I was just going to say, my mission is going to be finding the best deck that unlocks Precious Trolley, because I think that card can turn around some otherwise useless pile meme garbage into like a serviceable deck, just because the burst potential of that card does get board states going like nothing else. And I also think Latias EX is the other card that I think oozes potential and probably unlocks some archetypes that we otherwise thought couldn't work just because of space issues and because 2 switch cart and 1 prime catch isn't reliable in these like turbo Mew plus Squawk engines, whereas having a searchable switch card when you need it just enables aggressive combo decks and lets you use like the basic single prize Tatsugiri as this amazing pivot now, so you can have a board of Mew, Fez, Tatsu, and it feels like you can do anything you want to, even under INO. So
just like our list of support Pokemon, Joe. It's what we're just
it's added to the list. It's right there. We're doing 8 of the support mons all there in one deck.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my biggest hot take every time I kept thinking about the basics being able to maneuver with ease nowadays is whether Mawile or Wellspring Ogerpon starts to see a massive uptick in play just because of that. Maybe it's just Snorlax, but there's always ways out of it.
That's
right?
The headache. That's the headache that like sometimes you just lose by playing a Lati rather than these cards, which is annoying. But I don't think Latias is going to make like enough decks that makes like the Snorlax go up in percentage necessarily a lot or more wild. Like maybe it's that like pre-IC situation where a Latias deck is in the top 5, and we're like, aha, I have the tech card to win this one matchup, and now my deck can't lose or whatever. That gets you into day 2, but just as a space-saving device, that Lati is really appealing.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Any final words, boys? Otherwise, we can close this out, I think.
I think we're good, mate.
Yeah.
I'm going to see Chelsea Arsenal on Sunday. What are you doing at the weekend, guys?
I'm trying to spend time with my family before we got more stuff that we have to be away for.
Wholesome.
Awesome. Jack?
Yeah, not much. I have some work to do this weekend, unfortunately, so I'm having
That's a very unrab answer. I didn't like that.
Yeah, I know. I don't.
Normally, it's
have
a
anything...
humble bundle.
I don't have a life
purchase.
anywhere. Yeah, I don't have a life anywhere near as exciting as our friend Rab. But yeah, so going to be a quiet one. Probably playing some live, playing some Pocket, and just yeah, grinding some games, and inevitably probably getting bored of what will maybe feel like the same format that we've had for 3 months. But we'll see. I've also got a list of proxies as long as my arm that I haven't done yet. So there'll be some proxies that I might end up getting to as well. There's
look at
a whole host of
his
evolutions
website.
that I haven't translated yet. So
all right, okay, let's close it out there then. Thank you very much for joining us this time, Jack, and for
thank you for having me. It's been a laugh. It's been great fun.
Yeah, but this has been the TCG podcast. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and see you later.